The worst part about losing someone isn't the funeral. It's the moment you realize the truth may have been hidden from you the entire time. Ethan Cole repeated those words silently in his head as rain hammered against the windshield of his old Ford Explorer parked outside Rosewood Cemetery, just outside Reno, Nevada. The dashboard clock glowed 9:14 p.m. Exactly 10 years ago, at almost the same minute, his wife Lena disappeared without a trace. No body, no goodbye, just an abandoned silver sedan found near the edge of Highway 50 with her purse still inside and the headlights left on in the middle of the desert night. The police called it a likely abduction for 6 months before the case slowly died like every other forgotten story in America. Ethan never accepted that answer. Every year on this exact date, he drove 40 miles from his apartment in Reno to visit the empty gravestone her parents insisted on placing beside her mother. He hated the stone, hated the word beloved, hated the fake certainty carved into marble. Because deep down, Ethan always felt something was wrong about the entire thing. The rain eased as he stepped out of the SUV carrying a small bouquet of white lilies wrapped in grocery store plastic. The cemetery was empty except for the sound of distant thunder rolling across the Nevada hills. He walked slowly toward Lena's grave, boots sinking slightly into wet grass, until he suddenly stopped. Something white rested against the gravestone. At first he thought it was trash blown in by the storm. Then lightning flashed overhead. It was an envelope. Ethan stared at it for several seconds without moving. His name was written across the front in black marker. Ethan. No last name. No stamp. No address. His throat tightened instantly. He looked around the cemetery. Empty. Just rows of soaked gravestones fading into darkness. The wind picked up again, making dead leaves scrape across the pavement nearby. Ethan slowly crouched and picked up the envelope with trembling fingers. It felt old and damp. Inside was a folded piece of yellowed paper. He opened it carefully beneath the cemetery lights. It was a map, hand-drawn. Strange symbols circled different locations across Nevada and California, connected by thin red lines like veins. Near the center of the map was one sentence written in faded red ink. She never left this town. Ethan's breathing stopped for a moment. The words didn't feel random. They felt personal, intimate, like whoever wrote them knew exactly how to cut into the deepest wound he carried. His pulse pounded in his ears as he flipped the paper over. Nothing else. No signature. No explanation. Then his phone buzzed violently inside his jacket pocket, nearly making him drop the map. Unknown number. Ethan hesitated before answering. Hello. Silence. Only static. Then a woman's voice whispered softly through the speaker. You need to remember what happened at Black Hollow. The call disconnected immediately. Ethan froze. Black Hollow. He hadn't heard those words in over a decade. It was an abandoned mining settlement nearly 80 miles outside Reno where he and Lena had stopped during a road trip 3 months before she vanished. Lena loved forgotten places. Old diners. Empty highways. Ghost towns buried beneath desert dust. Ethan remembered her standing near a rusted gas pump at Black Hollow laughing while the wind whipped her blonde hair across her face. She took pictures everywhere they went. Hundreds of pictures. But after she disappeared, Ethan discovered every photo from Black Hollow had vanished from their camera roll. Every single one. Back then he assumed it was corruption from a damaged memory card. Now he wasn't so sure. Rainwater dripped from Ethan's jacket as he stared at the map beneath the cemetery lights. His mind raced through possibilities. A prank. Some sick joke from internet trolls who still posted conspiracy theories about Lena's disappearance on old Reddit threads. But no one besides Ethan knew about Black Hollow. Not even the detectives. He never told them because the memory always felt insignificant. Yet someone clearly knew. And worse, someone wanted him to remember. Ethan drove back toward Reno with the map spread across the passenger seat. The interstate was almost empty at that hour, just occasional truck headlights cutting through the rain. His fingers tightened around the steering wheel while memories flooded back harder than they had in years. Lena singing along to old Bruce Springsteen songs during late-night drives. Lena laughing in cheap roadside motels. Lena sketching maps in tiny notebooks because she hated GPS systems. Suddenly, Ethan noticed something strange. One of the circles on the map surrounded a location less than 10 miles ahead of him. A small gas station called Miller's Junction sitting alone beside the highway. Ethan slowed instinctively. He almost kept driving. Every logical part of his brain told him to go home, call the police, forget the entire thing. But logic stopped matching the second he heard Black Hollow. 10 minutes later, he pulled into Miller's Junction beneath flickering neon lights buzzing against the wet pavement. The gas station looked frozen in another decade. Rusted soda machines outside. A faded Pepsi sign hanging crooked near the entrance. Only one pickup truck parked near the air pump. Ethan grabbed the map and stepped inside. Warm air carrying the smell of burnt coffee wrapped around him instantly. Behind the counter sat an older man wearing glasses and a denim jacket. The cashier barely looked up from his crossword puzzle. "Kitchen's closed," he muttered. Ethan unfolded the map carefully on the counter. "Have you ever seen these symbols before?" The old man glanced down lazily at first. Then his expression changed completely. His face drained of color. "Where'd you get this?" Ethan leaned forward. "You recognize it?" The man immediately stood up and walked toward the front windows nervously, as if checking whether someone had followed Ethan inside. "You need to leave," he whispered. "Right now." Ethan's heartbeat accelerated. "What are you talking about?" The cashier pointed toward the back corner of the map with a shaking finger. "That mark right there. People around here used to call it the traveler's route." Ethan frowned. "What does that mean?" The old man swallowed hard before answering. "It means somebody is trying to lead you somewhere they were never supposed to return from." Suddenly, headlights swept across the gas station windows. A black SUV rolled slowly into the parking lot outside. The cashier's eyes widened with fear. "Oh God," he whispered. "They found you already." The black SUV remained motionless beneath the flickering gas station lights, while rainwater slid across its dark windows like moving shadows. Ethan could not see who was inside. The engine stayed running. Low headlights reflected against the wet pavement, creating long streaks of pale light beneath the pumps. The older cashier stepped backward from the window, so quickly he nearly knocked over a display of motor oil. "You need to leave now," he whispered again, his voice shaking harder than before. Ethan stared at the vehicle outside. "Who are they?" The man swallowed nervously. "People around here stopped asking questions about them years ago." Ethan folded the map tightly and slipped it into his jacket pocket. "What do they want from me?" The cashier looked directly into Ethan's eyes for the first time since he entered the station. "If they gave you the map, they want you moving. If they followed you here, they want to know what you remember." Ethan's stomach tightened. "Remember what?" Before the man could answer, the gas station lights flickered once, then twice. A strange silence filled the building. Even the buzzing neon sign outside suddenly went dark. The cashier immediately turned pale. "Go out the back," he said quickly. "Do not let them see your face again tonight." Ethan hesitated only a second before moving. Something deep inside him knew the old man was genuinely afraid. He pushed through a narrow employee hallway near the refrigerators and emerged behind the station into cold desert rain. Wind whipped across the empty gravel lot behind the building. Old tires and rusted storage drums sat scattered near a chain-link fence bending under years of desert storms. Ethan hurried toward his SUV parked around front, trying to stay hidden along the side wall of the building. Then he heard a car door open. He froze instantly. Footsteps echoed somewhere near the gas pumps. Slow, calm, deliberate. Ethan crouched behind a rusted ice machine near the back corner of the station. His pulse hammered in his chest while rain soaked through his jacket collar. A man's voice drifted through the darkness outside. "He came here exactly like she did." Ethan stopped breathing. Another voice answered from inside the SUV. A woman this time. "That means the map is working." Ethan carefully peeked around the corner. Two figures stood near the gas pumps beneath weak, fluorescent light. Both wore dark jackets. The man appeared tall with silver hair and black gloves despite the warm desert night. The woman stood beside the SUV holding something small in her hand. Ethan could not see clearly through the rain. "Do we approach him?" the woman asked quietly. The older man shook his head. "Not yet. He has to reach the fourth point first." Ethan's mind raced. Fourth point. The map. They knew about the map. Worse, they expected him to follow it. Suddenly the woman turned slightly toward Ethan's direction as if sensing movement. Ethan ducked back instantly behind the ice machine. His breathing became shallow and uneven. Seconds passed. Then footsteps approached slowly across wet pavement. Ethan looked desperately around the back lot. A narrow dirt path disappeared behind the station into open desert brush. Without thinking, he ran. Rain lashed against his face as he sprinted through mud and sagebrush beneath dark Nevada skies. The dirt trail curved around a low ridge behind the gas station, hiding him from view. Ethan kept running until his lungs burned and the lights from Miller's Junction faded behind him completely. Finally, he stopped beside an abandoned billboard tilted sideways in the sand. He bent over trying to catch his breath, while rain dripped from his hair onto the map still clenched inside his jacket. Then he heard tires crunching slowly somewhere nearby. Ethan immediately looked up. Headlights moved across the desert road, less than 200 feet away. The black SUV, moving slowly. Searching. Ethan crouched low behind the billboard while his mind spiraled through confusion and fear. Who were these people? Why did they mention Lena? And why did it sound like she had once followed the exact same map? A flash of lightning illuminated the desert around him for half a second. That was when Ethan noticed something strange carved into the wooden support beam behind the billboard. A symbol. The exact same symbol marked on the upper corner of the map. Ethan stared at it in disbelief. The lines matched perfectly. Beneath the symbol, someone had scratched 3 words into the wood years ago. Trust no memory. Ethan stepped backward slowly. The phrase sent chills through his entire body because suddenly another memory surfaced without warning. 10 years earlier. Black Hollow. Lena sitting inside the passenger seat of their car at sunset, while holding a small camcorder in her lap. If anything ever feels wrong, she had told him quietly, promise me you will trust what you feel, not what they tell you. Ethan had forgotten those words completely until this moment. Or maybe they had been buried somehow. His breathing grew heavier as fragments of the past began surfacing in flashes. Lena arguing with someone on the phone during their road trip. A motel room television playing static after midnight. A man in a gray jacket watching them from across a diner parking lot near Carson City. Ethan grabbed his head suddenly. The memories felt broken and incomplete, like pieces missing from the center of a puzzle. Then his phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Ethan stared at the screen for several seconds before answering carefully. Who is this? Static crackled softly through the speaker. Then the same female voice returned. Calm. Controlled. You should not have gone to Miller's Junction. Ethan's jaw tightened. Who are you? Someone trying to keep you alive. Where is my wife? Silence followed. Then the woman spoke again, lower this time. Do you remember what happened the night you left Black Hollow? Ethan closed his eyes tightly. He tried forcing himself to remember. Desert roads. Rain against windshield glass. Lena asleep beside him. Then nothing. Just emptiness. No, Ethan admitted quietly. That is because they erased part of it. Ethan's eyes opened instantly. What are you talking about? The map was created for people who survived the program. Ethan's voice rose sharply. What program? But the woman ignored the question. Look behind the billboard. The line disconnected immediately afterward. Ethan turned slowly. Behind the tilted billboard sat an old metal lockbox half buried beneath wet sand and brush. His heart pounded violently as he approached it. The box looked ancient, covered in rust and dirt. There was no lock anymore. Ethan opened it carefully. Inside rested a single VHS tape, sealed inside clear plastic. Written across the front in black marker were 4 words that made his blood run cold. For Ethan. Play alone. Thunder rolled across the desert as Ethan lifted the tape from the box with shaking hands. Then he noticed one final thing lying beneath it. A faded photograph. Ethan and Lena standing together outside Black Hollow 10 years earlier. But someone else stood beside them in the photo. A woman with dark hair and pale blue eyes smiling directly at the camera. Ethan felt his stomach drop instantly because he recognized her immediately. It was the same voice from the phone. And written on the back of the photo in Lena's handwriting were 6 terrifying words. She knows what they did to us. The photograph trembled slightly in Ethan's hands as cold desert wind pushed against the crooked billboard behind him. Rain had finally begun to slow, leaving only distant thunder rolling across the Nevada desert like a warning that refused to fade away. Ethan stared at the woman beside him and Lena in the old photo. Dark hair, pale blue eyes. A calm smile that somehow felt deeply unsettling now that he had heard her voice on the phone twice in a single night. He knew for certain he had never seen her before tonight. Yet there she was, standing only inches from him and Lena in a photograph taken 10 years ago at Black Hollow. His chest tightened painfully as he turned the photo over again. She knows what they did to us. Lena's handwriting. Ethan recognized every detail instantly. The way she curved the letter S. The slight slant in her capital T. There was no possibility this was fake, which meant Lena had known something terrible before she disappeared. Something she never told him. Ethan looked back toward the distant highway where faint headlights occasionally cut through darkness. The black SUV was gone for now, but the feeling of being watched still clung to him like cold water beneath his skin. He shoved the VHS tape and photograph carefully into his jacket pocket before hurrying back toward his SUV hidden along the side road behind Miller's Junction. Every sound made him tense. Every flash of lightning felt like exposure. By the time he reached the vehicle, his hands were shaking badly enough that he dropped the keys twice before unlocking the door. The engine roared to life beneath him. Ethan immediately locked every door and sat frozen behind the wheel, trying to think clearly. His eyes drifted toward the VHS tape resting on the passenger seat. For Ethan, play alone. The words felt personal in a way that terrified him more than threats ever could. Someone expected him to watch it. Someone had prepared this years earlier. Ethan drove back toward Reno with both hands gripping the wheel tightly, while memories continued surfacing in fragments. Lena standing beside motel windows staring at empty parking lots late at night. Lena asking strange questions during their road trip through Nevada. "Do you ever feel like memories can be planted?" she once asked him while they drove through the desert outside Tonopah. At the time, Ethan laughed and told her she watched too many conspiracy documentaries. Now that conversation replayed inside his head with horrifying clarity. By the time he reached his apartment complex near downtown Reno, it was after midnight. Rainwater dripped from the hood of the Explorer as Ethan parked beneath a broken street lamp outside his building. He lived on the third floor of a faded apartment complex squeezed between a pawn shop and an old laundromat that never seemed to close. Normally, the place felt quiet and forgettable. Tonight, it felt exposed. Ethan grabbed the VHS tape and hurried upstairs, constantly checking behind him. Once inside his apartment, he locked the deadbolt immediately and closed every blind. Silence filled the room except for the low hum of the refrigerator and distant traffic outside. Ethan stood motionless in the center of the living room for several seconds. His apartment still carried traces of Lena, even after 10 years. Her favorite record player remained untouched beside the bookshelf. An old green sweater still hung near the hallway closet because Ethan could never force himself to donate it. For years, those things felt like grief. Tonight, they suddenly felt like evidence. Ethan moved toward a dusty storage cabinet beneath the television. After several minutes of digging through old boxes, he finally found what he was searching for. An ancient VHS player he had not used since college. He stared at it uneasily before connecting it to the television with shaking hands. Thunder echoed again outside as the blue screen flickered alive. Ethan inserted the tape slowly. Static filled the screen first. Loud, violent, distorted. Then the image stabilized suddenly. Ethan stopped breathing. Lena appeared on screen sitting alone inside what looked like a motel room. She looked younger, nervous, exhausted. The timestamp in the lower corner read October 14th, 2016, 3 days after her official disappearance date. Ethan moved closer to the television in disbelief. "Ethan," Lena said quietly into the camera. "If you are watching this, it means they failed to erase everything." Ethan felt the air leave his lungs completely. Lena looked directly into the lens with red, tired eyes. "I know this is going to sound impossible, but you need to trust me. None of this happened the way they told you." The tape crackled briefly. Static lines crossed the screen. Then Lena continued. "Black Hollow was not an accident. We were brought there." Ethan shook his head slowly. His memories insisted they chose that route during a spontaneous road trip through Nevada. But suddenly, even that memory felt uncertain. Lena reached toward the camera slightly. "You have to remember the motel. Room 12. Ethan frowned instantly. Motel. Room 12. Something stirred deep inside his mind again. A hallway with yellow wallpaper. A flickering ice machine outside. The smell of cigarette smoke drifting beneath the door. Then pain exploded suddenly behind Ethan's eyes. He grabbed the edge of the table to steady himself while fragments flashed violently through his mind. A man speaking calmly. Bright white lights. Someone saying, "He is resisting the reset." Ethan stumbled backward, breathing hard. On the television, Lena lowered her voice even further. "There is a woman named Ava Brooks. She helped me escape. Ethan's eyes widened instantly. Ava, the woman from the photograph. The same voice from the phone calls. Lena continued speaking quickly now, as if running out of time. You cannot trust anyone connected to the Travelers Project. Not the police. Not the doctors. Not even your own memories. Ethan stared at the screen in stunned silence. Travelers Project. The phrase sounded vaguely familiar in the worst possible way. Then suddenly the apartment lights flickered once. Ethan looked toward the kitchen instinctively. When he turned back to the television, Lena was staring directly into the camera with pure fear in her eyes. They are already looking for you, she whispered. If you remember what happened in room 12, everything changes. A loud pounding suddenly hit Ethan's apartment door. Ethan jumped violently. 3 heavy knocks echoed through the apartment. Then silence. Ethan muted the television instantly. Another knock came. Slower this time. Deliberate. Ethan's heartbeat pounded in his ears while he moved quietly toward the door. Who is it? He called cautiously. No answer. He looked through the peephole. A woman stood alone in the hallway beneath weak fluorescent lights wearing a dark rain-soaked jacket. Pale blue eyes. Dark hair. Ava Brooks. Ethan's chest tightened immediately. She looked older than in the photograph, but unmistakably the same woman. Ava glanced directly toward the peephole, as if she knew he was watching. Then she spoke calmly through the door. You should not have played the tape yet. Ethan did not move. How do you know about the tape? Ava looked briefly down the hallway before answering. Because they can track every recording connected to the project. Ethan's stomach dropped. Who are you? Ava's expression shifted slightly. Sadness mixed with urgency. I was there with Lena the night you disappeared. Ethan's pulse stopped for half a second. I disappeared? Ava nodded slowly. For 72 hours. Ethan felt the room spin around him. That is impossible. Ava stepped closer to the door. Ethan, you were never supposed to remember any of this. Then suddenly all power inside the apartment building went out. Darkness swallowed the apartment instantly, as every sound inside the building seemed to vanish at once. The refrigerator hum stopped. The television screen went black. Even the hallway light outside Ethan's apartment disappeared beneath the sudden power outage. For one long, terrifying second, silence consumed everything. Then Ethan heard Ava's voice through the door again. Calm. Urgent. Do not turn on your phone flashlight. Ethan stood frozen in the middle of the apartment while his pulse thundered inside his chest. Rain tapped softly against the windows behind him. Somewhere deeper in the building, a distant door slammed shut. Ethan moved slowly toward the entrance without making a sound. How do I know I can trust you? He whispered through the darkness. Ava answered immediately. You do not. Ethan tightened his jaw. Then why are you here? A brief pause followed before she spoke again. Because Lena asked me to come back for you if the map ever resurfaced. Ethan's breath caught instantly at the sound of her name. Outside in the hallway, Ava lowered her voice even further. You have maybe 5 minutes before they reach this floor. Ethan looked instinctively toward the dark television screen, where Lena's frozen image still reflected faintly in the glass. Every instinct told him to stay inside and call the police. But another part of him already understood that none of this belonged in the normal world anymore. Not the map, not the tape, not the missing memories, and definitely not the fact that someone apparently erased 72 hours from his life. Ethan unlocked the deadbolt cautiously but kept the chain attached. The hallway outside remained almost completely dark except for weak emergency lights glowing red near the stairwell at the far end. Ava stood alone wearing a charcoal gray jacket soaked from rain, strands of dark hair clinging to her face. Up close, she looked exhausted. Not dangerous. But Ethan had learned tonight that appearances meant nothing anymore. Ava looked directly at him through the narrow opening. You watched the tape earlier than Lena predicted. Ethan frowned. Predicted? Ava nodded slightly. She spent years preparing for this. Ethan's mind reeled. Years? Lena disappeared 10 years ago. Ava's expression changed subtly at that word. Disappeared? No, she said quietly. She escaped 10 years ago. Ethan stared at her in disbelief. Where is she? Ava hesitated. For the first time since arriving, genuine uncertainty crossed her face. I do not know anymore. Ethan almost shut the door immediately. Ava noticed. Listen to me carefully, she whispered quickly. Everything they told you after Black Hollow was manufactured. Your memories, the investigation, even Lena's disappearance. None of it happened naturally. Ethan felt anger rising beneath the fear now. Then tell me what did happen. Before Ava could answer, footsteps echoed somewhere down the hallway stairwell. Slow. Measured. More than one person. Ava's eyes widened instantly. Too late, she whispered. They are here. Ethan looked toward the stairwell, just as shadows moved faintly beneath the emergency lighting. Ava grabbed the edge of the door urgently. You need to leave right now. Ethan's mind raced. Leave where? Room 12. The words hit Ethan like electricity. Motel. Room 12. Lena mentioned it on the tape only minutes earlier. What motel? Ethan demanded. Ava glanced back toward the approaching stairwell. Silver Pines Motel outside Carson City. Lena hid something there before everything collapsed. Ethan's heartbeat accelerated. Carson City sat nearly 30 miles south of Reno. Why there? Ava stepped closer to the narrow opening. Because it was the only place the project could not monitor. Ethan shook his head. I do not understand any of this. Ava looked at him with something almost like sympathy. You are not supposed to yet. The footsteps grew louder. Ethan could now hear low voices somewhere below the stairwell landing. Ava reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a small silver key attached to an old motel keychain labeled 12. She slipped it through the opening into Ethan's hand. Whatever happens tonight, she said quietly, do not let them convince you your memories are broken. They are hidden. Ethan stared down at the key in his palm. Before he could speak again, Ava suddenly looked past him into the apartment. Her expression changed instantly. Fear. Real fear. Ethan, she whispered sharply. Who else is inside? Ethan turned immediately toward the dark apartment behind him. Empty shadows stretched across the living room. The television remained black. Everything looked still. Then he heard it. Very faint. A clicking sound near the kitchen. Ethan's stomach dropped. Someone was inside. The sound came again. Soft. Metallic. Ethan stepped backward instinctively as the kitchen light suddenly flickered on for half a second before dying again. In that brief flash, Ethan saw the silhouette of a person standing near the counter. Tall. Motionless. Watching him. The lights vanished instantly afterward, plunging the apartment back into darkness. Ethan's pulse exploded with panic. Move, Ava hissed. She grabbed his arm and yanked him fully into the hallway, just as the apartment door behind him creaked slowly open from the inside. Ethan turned in shock toward the darkness beyond the doorway. A calm male voice emerged from within the apartment. Ethan Cole. The voice sounded strangely familiar. You should not be speaking with her. Ava immediately pulled Ethan toward the stairwell. Run. They sprinted down the dim hallway while footsteps erupted behind them. Ethan barely processed anything around him. The emergency lights cast long red shadows across stained apartment walls as Ava rushed him toward the back stairwell exit. Who was that? Ethan gasped. Ava did not slow down. Someone who helped erase you. The words slammed into Ethan harder than the panic itself. They burst through the stairwell door and hurried downward 2 steps at a time. Somewhere above them, another door slammed open. Voices echoed through the building now. Calm voices. Organized voices. Not police. How do they keep finding me? Ethan asked breathlessly. Ava looked back up the stairwell. Because the map woke the system back up. They reached the ground floor exit and pushed outside into cold desert rain. Ava immediately guided Ethan toward a narrow alley behind the building where an older dark green Jeep Cherokee sat parked beside overflowing dumpsters. Rain hammered against the hood while thunder rolled overhead again. Ethan climbed into the passenger seat while Ava started the engine quickly. Where are we going? Ethan asked. Ava pulled away from the curb without headlights for the first block. South. Ethan looked back toward his apartment building. 3rd floor windows remained completely dark except for one. His apartment. A silhouette stood motionless behind the glass watching the Jeep disappear into the rain. Ethan felt ice crawl through his chest. Ava finally switched on the headlights as they merged onto the empty highway leading out of Reno. The city lights faded behind them while wet desert roads stretched endlessly ahead beneath black skies. Ethan gripped the motel key tightly in his hand. Tell me the truth, he said quietly. What is the Traveler's Project? Ava kept her eyes fixed on the road for several seconds before answering. Officially? It never existed. Ethan waited. Ava exhaled slowly. Unofficially, it was an experiment designed to study memory reconstruction using isolated travelers across remote regions of the American Southwest. Ethan stared at her. Memory reconstruction? Ava nodded. The project believed memories could be rewritten through controlled environments, emotional trauma, and repeated narrative reinforcement. Ethan felt sick. You were saying somebody changed my memories? Ava finally looked at him directly. Ethan, they changed all of ours. Silence filled the Jeep except for windshield wipers scraping against rain. Ethan tried processing the impossible weight of what she was saying. Then another memory surfaced suddenly without warning. A motel hallway. Yellow wallpaper. Room 12. Lena crying softly while saying one sentence over and over again. They are making us forget each other. Ethan grabbed the dashboard hard as pain exploded behind his eyes again. Ava noticed instantly. What did you remember? Ethan breathed heavily. Lena knew. Ava nodded slowly. Yes. Ethan looked toward the endless dark highway ahead. Then why did she leave me? Ava's expression darkened with guilt. Because she believed she was the only way to keep you alive. Then, far behind them on the empty highway, two distant headlights appeared through the rain and began gaining speed. The most dangerous lies are the ones your own mind starts protecting. Ethan could not explain why that sentence suddenly appeared in his thoughts as the dark highway stretched endlessly ahead beneath sheets of Nevada rain. Maybe it was something Lena once said. Maybe it was another memory trying to claw its way back to the surface. Either way, the feeling growing inside him now was impossible to ignore. Someone had not only hidden the truth from him for 10 years. Someone had rebuilt his entire reality around the lie. Ava kept both hands steady on the wheel of the old Jeep Cherokee while windshield wipers fought against heavy rain. The road south toward Carson City looked almost empty except for occasional truck lights disappearing through the storm. But in the rearview mirror, those same distant headlights remained behind them. Constant, patient, watching. Ethan glanced back again. They are still there. Ava nodded without surprise. They always stay far enough away to avoid panic. Ethan frowned. Why? Ava's expression hardened slightly. Because fear causes unstable recall. Ethan looked at her sharply. Recall. Ava exhaled slowly. The Traveler's Project discovered something during early trials. Human memory becomes easier to manipulate when emotional patterns remain predictable. Fear creates resistance. Calm creates compliance. Ethan stared at her in disbelief. You talk about this like it is normal. Ava gave a bitter smile that vanished almost instantly. After enough years around them, abnormal things stopped shocking you. Silence settled between them again while rain hammered against the windshield. Ethan leaned back in the passenger seat trying to process everything he had learned in less than 6 hours. Lena alive after her disappearance. A hidden project rewriting memories. 72 missing hours erased from his life. And now this woman beside him claiming she once escaped alongside Lena. Ethan looked down at the motel key still resting in his palm. Room 12. Somehow that room mattered more than anything else tonight. What happened there? Ethan finally asked quietly. Ava tightened her grip on the steering wheel. You and Lena were supposed to become permanent travelers. Ethan frowned immediately. What does that mean? Ava hesitated. The project used isolated locations across Nevada, Utah, Arizona, and California to test long-term memory restructuring. Subjects were moved constantly between motels, ghost towns, highway stops, and controlled environments until old identities began dissolving naturally. Ethan felt cold all over. Subjects. Ava nodded slowly. Travelers. Ethan shook his head in disbelief. You were saying we were part of some experiment? Ava looked at him directly for a brief moment. You volunteered. Ethan laughed once in stunned confusion. No, absolutely not. Ava reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a faded photograph before handing it to him. Ethan stared down at it instantly. 3 people stood together beside a dusty motel sign beneath bright desert sunlight. Ethan, Lena, and Ava, all smiling, all relaxed. Behind them, the sign clearly read Silver Pines Motel. Ethan's throat tightened. He had never seen this photograph before. Yet the image felt deeply familiar in the worst possible way. When was this taken? He whispered. Ava kept driving. 2 weeks before everything collapsed. Ethan studied the photo carefully. He noticed something strange immediately. Lena's expression. She looked happy, but tired. Nervous beneath the smile somehow. And Ethan himself looked different too. Thinner. Sleep-deprived. I do not remember any of this. Ava nodded sadly. That was the point. Thunder rolled across the sky again as the Jeep passed a weathered highway sign, welcoming travelers to Carson City. Rain had weakened slightly now, leaving only mist drifting across the road. Ethan noticed the headlights behind them were closer than before. "How long have they been watching me?" Ethan asked. Ava answered instantly. "Since the map appeared." Ethan frowned. "No. Before that." Ava stayed silent for several seconds, then quietly said, "Probably since the day Lena vanished." Ethan looked away toward the passing desert landscape outside his window. His chest felt heavy now. Not panic anymore. Grief. The kind that builds slowly once denial finally starts collapsing. "She knew all this time," Ethan whispered. "She knew I was searching for her." Ava's expression softened slightly. "She watched over you whenever she could." Ethan looked at her sharply. "Then why never contact me?" Ava slowed slightly as they approached an empty intersection outside Carson City. "Because they wanted her alive." Ethan blinked. "Wanted?" Ava nodded once. Lena was never just another traveler. She remembered too much. Ethan stared at her. Remembered what? Ava looked ahead at the dark road stretching toward the outskirts of town. What the project was actually for. Before Ethan could ask another question, Ava suddenly turned off the main highway onto a narrow side road lined with old pine trees and fading motel signs. The area looked frozen somewhere between decades. Closed diners, empty parking lots, neon lights buzzing weakly through rain. Finally, the Jeep slowed beside an aging two-story motel hidden behind a row of overgrown bushes. Silver Pines Motel. Ethan felt instant pressure inside his chest the moment he saw it. Something about the building triggered a violent sense of familiarity. The yellow railings. The flickering ice machine near the office. The shape of the second-floor balcony. Memories stirred beneath the surface of his mind like shadows trying to rise through water. Ava parked near the far end of the lot and killed the engine. "We do not have much time," she said quietly. Ethan looked around. The motel appeared almost abandoned. Only 3 cars sat scattered across the parking lot beneath dim lights. Rainwater dripped steadily from broken gutters overhead. "Is this place still operating?" Ethan asked. Ava nodded. "Barely. That is why it survived." Ethan stepped out of the Jeep slowly. Cold air hit his face, immediately carrying the smell of wet asphalt and pine trees. He stared at room numbers lining the second-floor balcony. 11, 12, 13. The moment his eyes landed on room 12, another flash tore through his mind. Lena standing outside the same door crying. A man in a gray suit speaking calmly beside her. Ethan himself shouting something he could not fully hear. Then white light, sharp pain, and silence. Ethan staggered slightly. Ava steadied him immediately. "You are remembering again." Ethan breathed heavily. "Somebody was inside that room with us." Ava nodded carefully. "Dr. Raymond Voss." Ethan repeated the name quietly. "Who is he?" Ava's face darkened. "The architect of the Traveler's Project." Ethan looked toward room 12 again. The curtains inside remained closed. No lights visible. Yet the feeling pulling him toward that room felt overwhelming now. Almost magnetic. Ava handed him the motel key. "Lena hid something in there before we escaped." Ethan stared at the keychain trembling in his hand. What if somebody already found it? Ava shook her head. They never realized she left evidence behind. Ethan slowly climbed the metal staircase toward the second floor while rainwater dripped from rusted railings overhead. Every step made his heartbeat louder. Ava followed close behind, scanning the parking lot constantly. When Ethan finally reached room 12, he froze. A strange symbol had been scratched faintly into the door beneath the number. The exact same symbol from the map. Trust no memory. Ethan inserted the key slowly into the lock. His hand shook badly enough he almost dropped it. The door creaked open with a low groan revealing darkness inside. Ethan stepped carefully into the room while Ava remained near the entrance watching the parking lot below. The motel room smelled old and untouched. Dust covered most surfaces. Faded yellow wallpaper peeled near the ceiling. A small television sat on a wooden dresser beside a dead lamp. The entire room felt trapped in another year. Ethan moved slowly toward the center of the room as fragments of memory hit him harder now. Lena sitting on the bed, whispering urgently. Ava pacing beside the window. Someone pounding on the door late at night. Ethan turned toward the bathroom suddenly. Something felt wrong there. Without speaking, he walked toward it and pushed the bathroom door open. Inside, taped behind the mirror, rested another envelope with his name written across the front in Lena's handwriting. Ethan's pulse exploded, but before he could grab it, headlights suddenly flooded through the motel curtains outside. Ava immediately looked toward the parking lot below and whispered one terrifying sentence. They found us faster than they should have. Sometimes the truth does not return all at once. Sometimes it leaks through cracks until your entire reality collapses beneath it. Ethan felt those words forming silently inside his mind as headlights flooded across the thin motel curtains of room 12. Ava moved instantly toward the window, carefully pulling the curtain aside less than an inch. Her face tightened the moment she looked outside. 2 vehicles, she whispered. Not enough for extraction. Ethan stared at her. Extraction? Ava released the curtain slowly. That means they are here to observe first. Ethan's pulse hammered harder. Observe what? Ava looked directly at him. Whether your memory restoration becomes stable. The sentence made Ethan feel physically sick. Stable. Restoration. She spoke about his life like it was some kind of broken software repair. Rain tapped softly against the motel windows while distant thunder rolled across Carson City. Ethan reached into the bathroom and carefully pulled the envelope from behind the mirror. The paper looked old and yellowed at the edges, sealed with clear tape that had partly dried out over time. His name stretched across the front in Lena's unmistakable handwriting. Ethan, if you remember me, do not trust the man who apologizes. Ethan read the sentence twice. Slowly, a strange chill spread through his chest. The man who apologizes? He whispered. Ava's expression changed instantly. Fear. Real fear. Open it. Ethan tore the envelope carefully. Inside rested a folded motel stationery page and a small cassette tape labeled July Session 4. Ethan unfolded the paper first. His hands trembled badly now. The note inside was written quickly, almost desperately. Ethan, if you are reading this, then the reset failed again. I know you probably do not remember what happened here, but you need to understand something before they reach you. Dr. Voss is not trying to erase memories anymore. He is trying to replace people. If I disappear, it means I could not stop them. Ava is the only person who still remembers enough to help you. Trust the map. Trust the recordings. And whatever happens, do not let Voss make you apologize again. Ethan's breathing became uneven. The room suddenly felt smaller around him. What does she mean by that? Ava looked away briefly. You are remembering pieces out of order. Ethan tightened his grip on the paper. Then explain it. Ava hesitated. Dr. Voss believed identity itself could be rewritten through repeated emotional conditioning. The project stopped being about memory years before you arrived. Ethan frowned. Rewritten into what? Ava answered quietly. Whoever they wanted. Silence swallowed the room for several seconds. Ethan looked down at the cassette tape resting in his hand. July Session 4. What is this? Ava stepped closer carefully. Therapy recordings. Ethan blinked. Therapy. Ava nodded once. That is what the project called the conditioning sessions. Ethan's chest tightened. He suddenly remembered flashes again. Sitting in a chair beneath bright lights. A calm voice asking repeated questions. Lena crying beside him while someone said, emotional attachment remains resistant. Ethan grabbed the edge of the sink as dizziness hit him hard. Ava steadied him gently. Easy. Ethan shook his head. No. I remember that room. His voice became quieter now. There was glass. A speaker in the ceiling. Somebody kept asking me if I recognized Lena. Ava's face went pale. That room should still be buried. Ethan looked up sharply. Buried. Ava nodded slowly. Black Hollow was shut down after the fire. Ethan frowned immediately. Fire. Ava looked genuinely confused for the first time. You do not remember that part. Ethan shook his head. Ava stared at him carefully before speaking again. The facility beneath Black Hollow burned 6 months after you and Lena escaped. Ethan froze. Facility. Ava realized instantly she had said too much. Ethan stepped closer. There was a facility under the town? Ava finally nodded. Most of the ghost towns connected to the project had underground observation sites. Ethan felt another violent wave of fragmented memories crashing into him. Long underground hallways. Fluorescent lights humming above concrete floors. Lena whispering, keep walking. Do not look at them. Ethan staggered backward, breathing heavily. The motel room blurred slightly around him. Then suddenly another memory surfaced clearer than all the others. Dr. Raymond Voss. Ethan saw him perfectly now. Mid-60s. Gray suit. Calm voice. Kind eyes that somehow felt terrifying underneath the kindness. Ethan remembered sitting across from him inside a white room while Voss smiled gently and asked one question over and over again. Who do you believe you were before we found you? Ethan snapped back into the motel room, breathing hard. Ava saw it immediately. You remembered him. Ethan nodded slowly. He talked like a priest. Ava gave a hollow laugh. That is exactly what Lena used to say. Ethan looked down at the cassette tape again. How do we play this? Ava pointed toward an old clock radio sitting near the motel bed. Silver Pines kept cassette-compatible radios in some rooms for tourists. Lena picked this place because older electronics could not be remotely monitored easily. Ethan stared at the outdated radio beside the bed. Nothing about tonight felt real anymore. Yet somehow every impossible detail connected perfectly. Ethan inserted the cassette carefully into the player. Static crackled briefly. Then a soft clicking sound echoed through the room. A male voice emerged first. Calm. Professional. Dr. Voss. Session 4. Subject pair Ethan Cole and Lena Cole. Emotional stabilization trial. Ethan's entire body went rigid. Another voice followed. His own. Confused. Exhausted. How many sessions have there been? Voss answered smoothly. This is your 4th memory alignment. Ethan looked at Ava in horror. 4th. The recording continued. Lena's voice sounded next. Nervous but controlled. You said after this one we could leave. Voss remained calm. If emotional resistance declines sufficiently. Ethan suddenly remembered something else. The smell of antiseptic. A silver bracelet around his wrist with numbers printed across it. Voss speaking gently while technicians watched through glass windows. On the recording, Ethan's voice became sharper. What happened to the people before us? Silence filled the tape for several seconds before Voss answered quietly. Most travelers adapt eventually. Lena whispered suddenly. And the ones who do not? The tape distorted briefly. Then Voss spoke one sentence that made Ethan's blood run cold. Those identities are archived. The cassette clicked softly before continuing with distorted audio fragments. Ethan's breathing grew uneven again. Archived, he whispered aloud. Ava crossed her arms tightly. The project believed personalities could be preserved like recorded programs. Ethan stared at her. That is insane. Ava nodded. Yes. On the tape, Ethan's recorded voice suddenly sounded terrified. You are trying to replace us. Voss responded almost sympathetically. No, Ethan. We are trying to improve what came before. Static exploded across the speakers. Then another voice suddenly appeared on the recording. A woman Ethan had never heard before. Dr. Voss, we lost external surveillance. Somebody breached the south tunnel. Panic entered the tape instantly afterward. Footsteps. Shouting in the distance. Lena gasping softly. Then Voss spoke sharply for the first time. Begin emergency reset. Ethan's eyes widened. Emergency reset. The tape crackled violently before Lena screamed one sentence directly into the recorder. Ethan, if you remember me later, do not apologize for what you did. The recording stopped abruptly. Silence swallowed the motel room again. Ethan felt frozen. What did I do? Ava looked genuinely shaken now. I do not know. Ethan stared at her. You were there. Ava nodded slowly. Not for the final session. Ethan's heartbeat accelerated again. Then who was? Before Ava could answer, headlights outside suddenly disappeared. The motel parking lot went completely dark. Every light in Silver Pines shut off at once. Ethan turned toward the window instinctively as thunder rolled overhead again. Then a calm male voice echoed through the motel hallway outside room 12. Ethan. Ethan froze instantly because he recognized the voice immediately from his memories and the cassette tape. Dr. Raymond Voss had finally found him. The human mind can survive almost anything except the moment it realizes its own memories may belong to someone else. Ethan stood frozen inside room 12 while darkness pressed against the motel windows, and Dr. Raymond Voss's voice echoed calmly from the hallway outside. Ethan, the voice repeated gently, almost warmly. You have been searching for answers in the wrong places. Ava immediately stepped backward away from the door. For the first time since Ethan met her, she looked genuinely terrified. Do not respond, she whispered. Ethan's pulse thundered violently in his ears. Every memory fragment flooding back tonight pointed toward this man. The white rooms, the recordings, the sessions, the erased years. Yet somehow the sound of Voss's voice still carried something deeply familiar. Comforting even. Ethan hated that feeling instantly. Outside the room, Voss spoke again with unsettling calmness. Lena always underestimated how quickly your recall patterns would recover. Ethan clenched his fists. He knew this would happen. Ava whispered quietly. He has been waiting. Ethan stared at the motel door while rain tapped softly against the windows behind them. What does he want from me? Ava shook her head slightly. You. Silence filled the room for several long seconds. Then Voss sighed softly from outside the door. Ava, he called gently. You know running will only destabilize him further. Ava looked toward the door with open hatred now. Do not listen to him, she whispered. Everything he says is engineered. Ethan frowned. Engineered? Ava nodded quickly. The project trained behavioral influence patterns for years. Tone modulation. Trust reinforcement. Emotional synchronization. Ethan blinked. You are saying the way he talks is intentional? Ava looked directly into Ethan's eyes. That is why you remember him as comforting. Ethan felt another cold wave move through his chest. Because she was right. Deep down, despite the fear, Voss's voice triggered familiarity instead of panic. Like an old teacher. A trusted therapist. A father figure almost. And suddenly Ethan realized how dangerous that actually was. Voss spoke again from outside. Ethan, you deserve the full truth. But you are receiving it from someone whose memory structure collapsed years ago. Ava stepped toward the door furiously. You destroyed us. Voss remained perfectly calm. No, Ava. I preserved what would otherwise have been lost. Ethan looked back and forth between them while his mind spiraled harder. Nothing felt stable anymore. Not his memories. Not his past. Not even his emotional reactions. Suddenly, the motel room lights flickered weakly back on for half a second before dying again. Ethan caught a brief glimpse of himself reflected in the bathroom mirror. Pale face. Exhausted eyes. A stranger staring back at him. Then another memory slammed into him without warning. Ethan sitting inside a bright white room. Dr. Voss seated calmly across from him. Tell me your name, Voss says softly. Ethan answers immediately. Ethan Cole. Voss smiles. Good. And who were you before that? The memory vanished instantly. Ethan grabbed the motel dresser to steady himself. Ava saw it immediately. What did you see? Ethan breathed heavily. He asked me who I was before Ethan Cole. Ava closed her eyes briefly like she had feared this exact moment. The earlier layers are surfacing. Ethan stared at her. Layers? Ava looked deeply conflicted now. Ethan, there is something Lena did not want you remembering until the end. Ethan felt his chest tighten. What? Ava hesitated too long. Outside, Voss spoke again. You should tell him, Ava, before the recall reaches phase 6. Ethan looked sharply toward the door. What does that mean? Ava finally answered quietly. It means your original identity is beginning to overwrite the reconstructed one. Ethan stared at her in disbelief. Original identity? Ava nodded slowly. Ethan Cole was not the name you were born with. Silence crushed the room completely. Ethan felt the floor beneath him almost disappear. No, he whispered automatically. That is impossible. Ava stepped closer carefully. The Travelers Project selected individuals with fragmented psychological histories. People disconnected from stable personal anchors. Military trauma. Identity dissociation. Memory instability. You were considered highly adaptable. Ethan shook his head harder now. No, I remember my childhood. My parents. School. My life. Ava's eyes filled with sadness. You remember the narrative they reinforced. Ethan backed away from her instantly. Stop. Ava's voice softened. Ethan, stop talking. His breathing became uneven. Panic surged beneath his skin now in a completely different way. Not fear of danger. Fear of disappearance. If she was telling the truth, then who exactly had been grieving Lena for 10 years? Who had spent every anniversary visiting an empty gravestone? Who had lived inside that apartment in Reno surrounded by borrowed memories? Ethan suddenly realized something horrifying. Most of his memories before age 20 felt strangely distant compared to memories involving Lena. Less emotional, less detailed, like stories he had heard instead of experiences he lived. Voss spoke quietly through the door again. You are beginning to understand now. Ethan looked toward the entrance with anger rising inside him. What did you do to me? Voss answered instantly. I gave you peace. Ethan laughed once in disbelief. Peace. Voss's tone remained calm and almost sympathetic. Before the project, your psychological fragmentation was severe. Dissociative episodes, identity displacement, emotional instability. Ava interrupted sharply. You manipulated vulnerable people. Voss ignored her completely. Ethan, you volunteered because you wanted relief from the collapse already happening inside your mind. Ethan shook his head violently. No, but another memory surfaced immediately afterward. Sitting inside a hospital waiting room, hands trembling uncontrollably, a doctor quietly saying, without treatment, the episodes may worsen. Ethan staggered backward again. No, Ava looked terrified now. He is triggering guided recall. Voss continued softly through the door. Lena understood the process better than anyone. That is why she stayed with you. Ethan looked toward the cassette player on the bed. Stayed with me? Voss answered carefully. Because she loved the person you became. Ethan's throat tightened painfully. What does that mean? Silence followed for several seconds before Voss finally spoke again. Lena met you after reconstruction. Ethan felt the entire world tilt sideways. Ava immediately stepped forward. Do not listen to him. But Ethan barely heard her anymore. His mind raced through impossible implications. If Lena met him after reconstruction, then Ethan Cole himself may have only existed because of the project. The grief, the marriage, the life they built together. Was any of it real? Ethan suddenly remembered Lena saying one sentence during an argument years ago. Sometimes I miss the version of you that disappeared. At the time he thought she meant emotionally distant. Now he was no longer sure. Outside, thunder rolled loudly across Carson City. Voss lowered his voice almost to a whisper. Lena was never trying to expose the project, Ethan. She was trying to restore you. Ethan stared at the motel door in stunned silence. Ava shook her head desperately. He twists everything. Voss continued calmly. Ask yourself one question, Ethan. If Lena feared me so much, why did she keep returning to Silver Pines voluntarily? Ethan's stomach tightened instantly. Because he had no answer. Ava looked shaken now too. Ethan turned toward her slowly. Did she come back here after we escaped? Ava hesitated. And that hesitation alone terrified Ethan more than anything Voss had said all night. Ava, Ethan whispered. Answer me. Ava looked away briefly before speaking. Yes. Ethan felt sick instantly. Why? Ava swallowed hard. Because your condition kept getting worse. Ethan stared at her in horror. Condition? Ava's eyes filled with guilt. The reconstruction was failing. Outside the motel room, Voss spoke one final sentence that shattered whatever stability Ethan still had left. Lena begged me to save you, Ethan. And the night she disappeared, she made a choice you still do not remember. Then suddenly the motel television turned on by itself. The television screen flickered violently with static inside room 12 while rain hammered against the motel windows and thunder rolled across Carson City like distant artillery. Ethan stood frozen near the bed, unable to breathe properly as the screen slowly stabilized on its own. No remote, no signal, just an old motel television suddenly coming alive in the middle of darkness. Ava stepped backward immediately. That should not be possible, she whispered. Ethan barely heard her. His mind remained trapped on the last thing Dr. Voss said. Lena begged me to save you. The sentence echoed inside his skull like poison. Because part of him hated Voss instantly, but another part feared the possibility that he might be telling the truth. On the television screen, static slowly cleared into grainy black and white security footage. Ethan's pulse stopped cold the moment he recognized the location. A white hallway underground. Fluorescent lights. Metal doors. Black hollow. No, Ethan whispered. Ava looked toward the screen in horror. That footage was destroyed. The timestamp in the corner read October 11th, 2016. 2 days before Lena officially disappeared. Ethan moved closer slowly as figures appeared on the recording. Himself, Lena, and Dr. Raymond Voss walking together through the underground hallway. Ethan stared in disbelief. The version of himself on screen looked exhausted and unstable. Thin, pale, nervous. Nothing like the life he remembered afterward. Voss walked calmly beside them, holding a folder while Lena kept glancing anxiously behind her shoulder. Then the recording suddenly captured audio. Voss's voice echoed through the motel room from the television speakers. The memory collapse is accelerating faster than projected. Ethan watched his recorded self rub both hands against his face repeatedly. I cannot hold on to anything anymore. The recorded Ethan whispered. Every morning feels different. Lena grabbed his arm tightly. We can stop the sessions. Voss immediately shook his head. Stopping now would leave the identity fragmentation incomplete. Ethan felt physically sick hearing those words. Identity fragmentation. On the screen, Lena suddenly turned toward Voss with anger in her eyes. You promised the reconstruction would stabilize him. Voss answered calmly. It was stabilizing until the prior identity began resurfacing. Ethan stared at the television in shock. Prior identity. Ava looked equally disturbed beside him now. This recording was never part of the archives, she whispered. The footage continued. Ethan watched himself pacing anxiously inside the hallway while grabbing at his own hair. I keep remembering things that never happened. The recorded Ethan said shakily. People I do not know. Places I have never been. Voss answered with clinical calmness. Those memories belong to the previous structure. Ethan's stomach turned. Previous structure. Not person. Structure. Like his identity was merely architecture. On screen, Lena suddenly stepped directly between Ethan and Voss. You said he would still be himself. For the first time, Voss looked genuinely unsettled. Lena, identity continuity is subjective. Ethan's recorded self suddenly looked up sharply. You mean I am disappearing? Silence filled the hallway recording for several seconds. Then Voss answered quietly. Not disappearing. Evolving. Ethan felt cold all over. Ava whispered softly beside him. This was before the emergency reset. On the television, Lena grabbed Ethan's hand tightly. We are leaving tonight. Voss sighed heavily. If you leave now, the instability will return. Lena's eyes filled with tears. Then we will deal with it together. Ethan could barely process what he was watching anymore. Lena knew. She knew the reconstruction was failing. She knew his identity was unstable. And somehow she still stayed beside him through all of it. Suddenly, the hallway recording glitched violently. Static burst across the screen. Then the image jumped forward several hours according to the timestamp. Ethan immediately noticed something different. Red emergency lights flashed through the underground facility now. Alarm sounds echoed faintly in the background. Smoke drifted through the hallway ceiling vents. The camera angle shifted toward a secured doorway labeled Session Chamber B. Ethan's recorded self stood near the door breathing heavily while Lena argued with Voss nearby. There is no time left, Lena shouted. The fire already reached the lower tunnels. Ethan stared at the screen. Fire. Ava had mentioned the facility burning years ago. But now he was watching the moment everything collapsed. Voss remained eerily calm despite the chaos around him. If Ethan leaves in this condition, he will not survive the restoration failure. Lena shook her head desperately. Then erase me instead. Ethan's heart nearly stopped. The recording crackled but continued. Voss stared at Lena for several seconds without speaking, then quietly asked, You understand what that would require? Lena nodded slowly while tears streamed down her face. He deserves a chance at a normal life. Ethan felt the room spinning around him. Ava covered her mouth beside him in shock. No, she whispered softly. On screen, Ethan's recorded self grabbed Lena's arm immediately. What are you talking about? Lena turned toward him with heartbreaking sadness in her eyes. If they remove my imprint from your reconstruction cycle, the instability might stop. Ethan stared blankly at the screen, unable to process the meaning completely. Imprint. Reconstruction cycle. Lena stepped closer to him on the recording and placed both hands against his face. Listen to me carefully, she whispered. If you remember me later, it means the reset failed again. Ethan felt tears forming in his eyes before he even realized it. The footage shook violently as alarms blared louder through the underground facility. Smoke thickened across the hallway. Voss spoke quickly now. We must begin the emergency transfer immediately. Ethan's recorded self looked completely terrified. No, we leave together. Lena smiled sadly through tears. You are not supposed to remember me anymore. Ethan inside the motel room grabbed the edge of the dresser, trying to steady himself. Every emotion inside him felt like it was tearing apart simultaneously. Love, fear, grief, confusion. On the television, Lena kissed Ethan gently on the forehead before stepping backward toward Voss. I would rather disappear than watch them erase you again, she whispered. Ethan's recorded self lunged toward her immediately, but two people in gray uniforms suddenly appeared behind him holding restraints. The footage distorted heavily with static. Ethan heard himself shouting Lena's name repeatedly while emergency alarms screamed through the facility. Then the screen cut abruptly to another room. A white chamber. Bright lights overhead. Ethan strapped into a chair, breathing heavily. Dr. Voss standing beside him calmly. Lena nowhere in sight. Ethan's recorded voice sounded broken now. Where is she? Voss answered quietly. Lena made a voluntary transfer choice. Ethan struggled against restraints desperately. Bring her back. Voss leaned closer. You will not remember her after tonight. Ethan felt physically ill hearing the words. On screen, his recorded self suddenly stopped struggling and looked directly at Voss with horrifying clarity. Then promise me one thing. Voss paused. What? Ethan's recorded self whispered slowly. If she ever comes back for me, do not let me apologize for surviving. The motel room fell completely silent except for rain outside. Ethan stared at the television with tears running silently down his face now. Lena did not abandon him. She sacrificed herself to preserve whatever identity remained inside him. Ava looked devastated beside him. I never saw this recording before, she whispered. Ethan could barely speak. What did they do to her? Before Ava could answer, the television screen flickered again. Dr. Voss suddenly appeared live on the screen, staring directly into the camera from somewhere outside the motel. That, Voss said calmly, depends entirely on whether Lena still exists. Ethan froze instantly. Voss continued speaking through the television with unsettling calmness. The emergency transfer procedure was never fully completed. Ethan's pulse accelerated again. What does that mean? Voss's expression darkened slightly for the first time. It means part of Lena may still be embedded inside your reconstructed memory architecture. Ethan stared blankly at the screen. Ava whispered softly beside him. That is impossible. Voss looked directly into the camera. No, Ava. That is exactly why the map reactivated after 10 years. Ethan's breathing became shallow again. You are saying Lena is inside my memories? Voss answered quietly. I am saying your mind may still be carrying someone it was never designed to hold. Then suddenly a loud metallic crash echoed from somewhere outside room 12. The crash outside room 12 echoed through the motel like something heavy collapsing onto wet pavement. Ethan spun toward the window instinctively, while the television screen behind him flickered with static around Dr. Raymond Voss's face. Ava immediately moved toward the curtains again, carefully pulling them aside just enough to see the parking lot below. Somebody hit the maintenance gate, she whispered. Ethan's pulse pounded violently as rain streaked across the motel windows. The parking lot beneath them looked chaotic now. Headlights from two dark vehicles cut through sheets of rain, while motel signs buzzed weakly overhead. Then Ethan noticed something strange. One of the black SUVs sat abandoned with the driver's side door hanging open. Where are they? Ethan asked quietly. Ava did not answer immediately. Her expression slowly changed from fear to confusion. That is not possible, she whispered. Ethan stepped closer. What? Ava pointed toward the far edge of the parking lot. A figure stood motionless beneath the flickering neon motel sign. Female. Blonde hair moving softly in the wind. Ethan's breathing stopped instantly. Lena. Even from a distance, Ethan recognized her immediately. The way she stood slightly turned with one hand near her jacket pocket. The same posture he had watched 1,000 times during road trips and late-night gas station stops years ago. Ethan moved toward the motel door without thinking. Ava grabbed his arm immediately. No. Ethan stared at her in disbelief. That is her. Ava's voice became urgent. Ethan, listen to me carefully. If Voss is right about the transfer instability, then visual memory triggers can be manipulated. Ethan pulled away from her. I know my wife. But deep inside, uncertainty already crept through him. Because Lena looked exactly the same as she had 10 years earlier. Not older. Not different. Exactly the same. On the television behind them, Dr. Voss spoke calmly through layers of static. You should ask yourself why she has not aged. Ethan froze instantly. Outside beneath the motel sign, Lena slowly lifted her head toward room 12 as if she could hear everything happening inside. Ethan's chest tightened painfully. Ava stepped between Ethan and the door. This is how the project destabilizes recall patterns. Ethan shook his head hard. No, she is real. Ava lowered her voice. Maybe, but if she still exists inside your memory architecture the way Voss described, then your brain may project her physically during reconstruction stress. Ethan stared at her like she was insane. You are saying I am hallucinating? Ava looked deeply conflicted. I do not know anymore. Ethan turned back toward the window. Lena still stood motionless beneath the rain. Then slowly, she raised one hand toward room 12 and pressed 2 fingers against her wrist. Ethan felt ice flood through his veins instantly. It was their old signal. Years earlier, during crowded airports and loud concerts, Lena used that exact gesture whenever she wanted Ethan to trust her silently without speaking. No one else knew it. Ethan immediately moved for the door again. Ava blocked him harder this time. Do not do this. Ethan's voice cracked with emotion. She knows the signal. Ava's expression turned haunted. Or your memory does. Silence crushed the motel room while rain hammered outside. Then suddenly the hallway speakers inside Silver Pines Motel crackled alive overhead. Static hissed through hidden ceiling speakers Ethan had not even noticed before. Dr. Voss's voice filled the motel hallway calmly. Ethan, if you leave the room now, your reconstruction sequence may complete irreversibly. Ethan looked upward toward the ceiling. What does that mean? Voss answered immediately. It means whatever remains of your original identity could disappear permanently. Ava closed her eyes briefly. He is forcing a decision point. Ethan stared at her. What are you talking about? Ava stepped closer carefully. The project used emotional crossroads to stabilize whichever identity structure became dominant. Love, fear, guilt, memory, attachment. Ethan looked back toward the parking lot. Lena had begun walking slowly toward the motel staircase now. You mean they made people choose? Ava nodded. Because identity forms around emotional commitment. Ethan's mind raced wildly. Every answer tonight only created worse questions afterward. If Lena truly survived somehow, why wait 10 years to appear? Why lead him through maps and hidden tapes instead of simply contacting him directly? And why did everything connected to her now feel trapped somewhere between memory and reality? Ethan suddenly realized something else too. He had never actually seen Lena speak since tonight began. Only recordings. Distance. Messages. Signals. His heartbeat accelerated. Ava, he whispered slowly. Have you seen her before tonight? Ava hesitated too long. Ethan looked at her sharply. Answer me. Ava swallowed hard. Not physically. Ethan felt cold all over again. What does that mean? Ava's voice became quieter now. After the Black Hollow fire, some travelers reported residual encounters. Ethan frowned. Residual? Ava nodded uneasily. Fragments of reconstructed identities appearing during memory destabilization periods. Ethan stared at her in disbelief. Ghosts? Ava shook her head quickly. No. Cognitive echoes. Ethan laughed once bitterly. That sounds even worse. Outside, Lena reached the bottom of the motel staircase. Rain soaked through her jacket while neon light flickered across her face. Ethan's chest physically hurt seeing her again. She looked alive. Real. Familiar. Then suddenly she looked directly toward room 12 and mouthed 3 words silently. Do not trust him. Ethan froze because he understood instantly she meant Voss. On the television, Voss sighed softly. You see? Even now she is still trying to divide you. Ethan turned furiously toward the screen. What did you do to her? Voss's expression remained calm, but strangely tired now. Lena made a transfer choice beyond the project's intended parameters. Ethan's jaw tightened. Stop talking like she was an experiment. Voss remained silent briefly before answering quietly. Because she was the first traveler willing to sacrifice continuity for another subject. Ethan looked toward the parking lot again. Lena had stopped moving now near the staircase entrance. Waiting. Watching. What happened after the transfer? Ethan demanded. Voss's face darkened slightly on the screen. The memory architecture became unstable. Ava whispered softly beside Ethan. That should not have been survivable. Ethan looked between them desperately. Just tell me the truth. Voss finally answered. Part of Lena's cognitive imprint merged with your reconstructed identity during emergency reset. Ethan stared blankly at the screen. Merged? Voss nodded slowly. Certain emotional pathways could no longer separate completely. Ethan suddenly remembered something terrifying. During the years after Lena disappeared, he occasionally experienced moments that felt wrong somehow. Knowing songs he had never heard. Remembering conversations that never happened. Feeling emotions attached to places he had never visited. He always blamed grief. But now, Ethan looked toward the motel mirror. His reflection stared back at him, looking exhausted and unfamiliar. You are saying part of Lena has been living inside my mind for 10 years. Voss answered carefully. I am saying your identities became interconnected during Reconstruction collapse. Ethan's breathing became uneven again. Ava grabbed his shoulder gently. Ethan. But Ethan barely heard her anymore, because another memory suddenly surfaced stronger than any before it. Lena sitting beside him inside room 12 years ago, whispering softly through tears. If I stay with you this way, promise me you will keep living. Ethan stumbled backward as the memory hit him completely. Not imagination. Not fragments. A real conversation. Ethan looked toward the parking lot again. Lena slowly placed her hand against her chest exactly where Ethan suddenly felt sharp pressure inside his own chest at the exact same moment. The sensation terrified him instantly. Ethan whispered softly, I felt that. Ava's face drained of color completely. No. Ethan looked at her. What? Ava stepped backward slowly. Emotional synchronization was only theoretical. Ethan's pulse accelerated violently. What does that mean? Ava stared at him with genuine fear now. It means Voss may have been telling the truth. Then suddenly, every light inside Silver Pines Motel exploded back on at once.